So as you can see from what we've been doing the last few videos, we're doing like Jeopardy math, right? Often you're given in Jeopardy, the TV show, you're given the question, you have to figure out, you're given the answer, you have to figure out the question. Here, what we're doing is we are now doing Jeopardy of expanding. Hold on, this isn't clear. Let me refocus the camera. Okay, much better. So when we're expanding, we FOIL out the brackets and we go this way. When we're factoring, we're going this way. So we've just gone over common factoring. Now we're going to try trinomial factoring. So there's a very specific procedure we follow, and when you follow it, you'll be able to factor any trinomial. So let's begin. First of all, you know you have a trinomial to factor when you have a squared term. So like an x to the 2, then you have an x to the 1, and then you have no x or no variable. It could be y squared y, constant, m squared m, but usually it's x squared x. Or it won't be x squared y. They'll be the same variable. And they'll be in descending order, which we talked about at the beginning of this chapter. So x to the 2, x to the 1, and then this is no x's at all whatsoever. So I'm going to walk you through the procedure. And here we go. So right now, there's two kinds of factoring trinomials. First, we're going to learn when the number in front of the x squared is a 1, and then we'll learn what to do when the number in front of the x squared is not a 1. But for now, we're going to have just a 1. And you're used to seeing y equals ax squared. Never mind y equals, just you're used to seeing ax squared plus bx plus c as a trinomial. So right now we're doing questions where a equals 1. Okay? Nothing in front of there, so that's a 1. So here's what we do. We have this question, x squared plus 10x plus 21. And what we need to do is we need to figure out which two numbers multiply to positive 21 and add, so if that was a subtraction, we'd say to subtract, to add to positive 10. I'm going to write it right here in English, okay? Or let's just see here. Need two numbers whose sum is this. Okay, but I'd like you to actually look at it from this way. We're looking to find two numbers that multiply to 21 and add, and it's add because of this sign, to 10. Don't worry about the positive and negatives right now. We'll do that separately. So you need to make a list of the numbers that multiply to 21, which are 1 and 21 and 3 and 7. And of course, it's easy to see which two add to 10. It's not these two, it's these two. So when that happens, what you do is you write down two empty brackets, enough to fill in a binomial, so not just two little brackets close together. If it's x squared, you write x and x. If it's y squared, you write y, and so on. And then you put the numbers in the brackets, 3 and 7. And then this is how you decide on the signs. If the second, you always look at the last sign first. If this sign is positive, that means that the signs in the bracket will be the same, because we know when we multiply two numbers, if the signs are the same, both positive or both negative, the product, when we multiply the two numbers, the answer or the product will be positive. So if this is positive, that means these signs are the same. And then this will tell you what they are. So first we look here, the sign of C. If C is positive, then we say the signs are the same, and then this tells us what they are. So in this case, the signs are the same, and they're both positive. Ta-da! It's factored. Now, let's expand the brackets and check. So x times x is x squared. That's 7x. That's 3x. That's 21. And of course that adds up to 10x, and as you can see, that's the original question, and you have factored that trinomial into a product of two binomials. Ta-da! You're done. So we do need to practice a little bit more, so I just want to say, hang on just one second, I just need to see something. Okay, so what I want to make clear is about these signs and when's positive and when's negative. So let's do this. Before we go on to this question, let's just go up here. This will tell us, so if we have, let's say, hang on, x squared plus so let's say we have this trinomial. This says in English, what two numbers multiply to 7 and add, because of that sign, add to 8. Well, of course, we know 7 plus 1 add to 8, and 7 times 1 multiply to 7, so the answer would be x plus 1 and x plus 7. If this was a negative, what two numbers multiply to 7 and add to negative 8? Well, this would tell us the signs are the same, and then this would tell us what the signs are. So the answer would actually be this, with two negatives. Because here, when we FOIL these out, we will end up with negative 8. So again, the first step is number 1, check the sign of the last number. If it's positive, then the signs are the same, and then the sign in front of B, the number in front of the x, the sign in front of B will tell you what the signs are. So number 1, check the sign of C. 1, is C positive or negative? If it's positive, you do this. You then look at the sign. Hang on one sec. You then look at the sign of B. And the sign at B will tell you the sign that goes in the brackets. If it's negative, you do something else. Right now we're just focusing on if this is positive. So if this is positive, this tells you the signs in the bracket are the same, and this will tell you what they are. Actually, I'm going to change this. Just instead of look at B, I'm going to write B tells you what they are. Okay? Now what happens if the signs are negative? If the sign here is negative? Well, let's go down to this question because that's what we've got. So when the sign is negative, that tells you that the signs in the brackets will be different. And this will tell you the sign of the bigger number. So let's see here. So when we look at this question, we want to know what two numbers multiply to 24 and subtract, and it's subtract because of the, subtract because of this, subtract to negative 2. That's the question. What two numbers multiply to 24 and subtract to 2? Never mind the negative or positive for now, actually. So here's a list of all the factors of 24. Never mind the positive and negatives, just look at the numbers. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Which of these pairs of numbers subtract to 2? Of course, it's 4 and 6. So we have x's here, so we're going to put x's here. We know our numbers are 6 and 4, because those are the ones that multiply to 24. And remember, this tells us the signs are different, and this tells us the sign of the bigger number. Well, what's bigger, 6 or 4? Well, of course, 6 is 4, so 6 is that, and these signs are different, so that must be that. That's it. Just need practice now. So, here, we've got what two numbers multiply to 18 and subtract to 3. Well, the factors of 18 are 1 and 18, 2 and 9. Do those subtract to 3? No. 3 and 6. Yep, those subtract to 3. So our answer, forget all of this. We don't need all that work. It's not necessary. So here we're going to have that the signs are different. First there's x's. The signs are different, and the numbers are 3 and 6, and the bigger signs are different, and the bigger sign is going to be positive. So 6 is bigger than 3, and we're done. You're going to have to practice a whole load of these questions, but when you do, you'll know exactly what to do. Now here we have a situation where we're first going to common factor. The first kind of factoring you always try is common factor. Always common factor first. So, when there is no number in front of the x squared, there's nothing to common factor. But here, there is. So let's common factor out the 3. And then we're left with x squared plus 4x plus 3. So now we need to know x. The signs are the same and they're both positive. What two numbers multiply to 3 and add to 4? You're not going to need to make a chart like this most times. Because in your head you know that 3 times 1 is 3 and 3 plus 1 is 4. So the numbers are 3 and 1. Okay? Let's take a look at this one. What can we common factor out first? Well, they all have a b, so let's do that. And then we're left with x squared plus 10x minus 24. That's x squared, so we'll have x's. The signs are different. What numbers multiply to 24 and subtract to 10? So if you can't think of it, just make a little list. So 1 times 24 does not subtract to 10. 2 times 12, well, there we go, does subtract to 10. So the signs are different. The bigger number is positive. What's bigger, 2 or 12? 12. Ta-da! Okay, now I'm going to write the steps out now, just in case you really need to see them, instead of just listening to them. So when you have I'm going to write this out like this, x squared plus bx plus c. So the first thing you do is you look at the sign of c. If it's positive, you do this. If it's negative, you do that. Now let's fill that in. If it's positive, then the signs are the same, and B tells you what they are, right? So if that's positive, that tells you they're both positive. If that's positive and negative, that's, whoops, that tells you, oh my goodness, hang on a second. That tells you the signs are the same, and that tells you what the signs are. Then you're going to do what two numbers multiply to C and add to b. Okay? And then you're done when you figure it out. Now let's take a look what happens if you look at the sign of C and it's negative. If you look at the sign of C and it's negative, then what you do is you'll know that the signs are different. And B tells you the sign of the bigger number. So if you have this, then the signs will be different and the bigger number will be positive. If you have this, the signs will be different, the bigger number will be negative. So the first thing you do is look at the sign of C. If it's negative, that tells you the signs will be different, and the sign of B will tell you what the bigger number is, the sign of the bigger number. Then what you do is you will see what two numbers multiply to C and subtract because of this, subtract to B. And then you just make sure that you put the bigger number in front of the sign that this told you to do, right? So let's just do 4. Make sure you put the correct number with the correct sign. Right? Here the signs are the same, so that you don't have to pay attention to that, right? Here, it didn't, if you put x plus 1 and x plus 3 or x plus 1 and x, it doesn't matter because they're both the same. When the signs are different, it makes a difference if 12 goes here or 12 goes here. Okay? So this is your checklist, or your roadmap, if you will, of how to do factoring when you have a 1 in front of your x squared. Let's take a look at these last questions here. Find two values for k such that the trinomial 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, they're both trinomials, can be factored over the integers, which means that they can be factored with integers. They can be factored with integers. There's no decimals or fractions here. So let's take a look. We know that we need to find two numbers that multiply to k and add to 9. The signs are the same and they're both negative. So let's write that down first. The signs are the same and they're both negative. So if the two numbers have to add to 9, what are they going to be? What two numbers add to 9? Well, how about 5 and 4? Okay, well 5 and 4 would then multiply to what? 20. So for this, k will be 20. Let's do another one like this. Let's say we don't pick 5 and 4. What's another option of two numbers that add to 9? 8 and 1? Okay, so if they're 8 and 1, then 8 and 1. So what do those two multiply to? 8 and 1. They multiply to 8. So k will be 8. So there's multiple answers. There's not an infinite number of answers, but there's more than one answer. Okay, now let's see what happens when we don't know the b term. Here we didn't know the c term, right? C term. Now we're going to know what happens if we don't know the b term. So here we go. So when we don't know the b term, well, let's see what we can do. We've got x The signs are the same, they're both positive. What two numbers multiply to 6 and add to something? Well, what two numbers multiply to 6? Pick any two numbers that multiply to 6. How about 2 and 3? Okay, and 2 and 3 add to what? They add to 5. What's another thing? Let's do another one. What two numbers multiply to 6? Well, 6 and 1 multiply to 6. Okay. X plus 1 and x plus 6. So when we have that, two numbers that multiply to 6 and add to what do those add to? Exactly, they add to 7. There we go. That's factoring with trinomials, a equaling 1.